Alright, so check this out. I saw myself. Glitch or doppelganger? When I was in college, I did an internship at a hospital. One day, while walking through a waiting area, I saw someone sitting there and I immediately froze. It wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. We were identical in every way. Same face, same hairstyle, even the same subtle mannerisms. The way she sat, the way she looked around the room, it was all me. I stood there for a moment just staring. My whole body felt cold. I didn't feel curious or amazed. I actually felt something much worse, dread. This overwhelming sense that I needed to get away. It was completely illogical, and in retrospect, I wish that I had approached her. Or I should say approached myself, I guess. But something deep in me was screaming at me not to. It wasn't the same fear that you'd feel while watching a horror movie. This was more instinctive, more primal, like I had just come across something that I was never meant to see. I walked away, and I've never experienced anything like it again. But even now, years later, I think about it all the time. I've tried to tell myself that maybe it was just someone who looked a lot like me, but I can't convince myself of that. I knew when I saw her, that was me. I still often wonder if that event had any meaning in particular. Was it a glitch? Did I see a doppelganger? Or another version of me that just somehow crossed paths with this reality? I don't know. If anyone has any thoughts, or if something like this has even happened to you, I'd really like to hear about it. Strange experience with the moon tonight. Something really strange happened tonight. So strange, I've been thinking about it for hours. I needed a place to write it down, and I'm hoping that this subreddit is the right place. For what it's worth, I'm usually a very skeptical person. I'm not typically drawn to weird or unexplained stories, but this one really shook me. I'm a mother, and most evenings I take a walk around our neighborhood with my 2-year-old daughter. It's a simple, comforting routine. One of our favorite parts is looking for the moon. She loves it, and it's become this little game that we do together. First thing we always do is scan the sky and find it. Tonight, as we started our walk, we looked up and we saw the moon in the far left corner of the sky. It was a tiny crescent, just a little sliver hanging there. "A baby moon," I said, and she giggled, pointed at it like she always does. We continued walking, maybe 100 feet or so down the street, still facing the same direction. We hadn't turned around or anything. Then, she suddenly looks up towards the far right corner of the sky, pointed again and says, clear as day, "Another moon." She just recently learned the word "another," and I thought it was cute. I laughed and said, "There's just one moon, baby." But then I looked where she was pointing, and there it was. The moon in a completely different part of the sky. I whipped my head back around to where we'd first seen it in the far left corner, but nothing. That was gone. That crescent moon over the neighbor's roof, where their kid had been shooting hoops just moments earlier, wasn't there anymore. I stood frozen, blinking. Tired, maybe? Sleep deprived? Maybe? But then my daughter did something that made it clear that she saw it too. She looked back to the left, and then right, and then left again, back and forth like I did, confused. She kept saying, "Bye, moon," to where it was, and "Hi, moon," to where it had moved. We both just stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, turning our heads back and forth, trying to make sense of it. I kept replaying it in my mind. We were on the same stretch of sidewalk. We hadn't turned around or taken any curves, and there's no way that I misremembered where we had just seen it. And for some context, the first moon was above my neighbor's house on our usual route. The second one was toward the creek, near the entrance of the neighborhood, complete opposite directions. And the entire thing happened within maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I've spent all night trying to make sense of it, but I can't. Was it an optical illusion? Or a trick of the light? Could something have reflected the moon and made it appear somewhere else? I don't know, but my toddler saw it too. And that made it that much harder to just write off. Whatever it was, it felt off. Just a tiny crack in reality. There are several comments under this story stating multiple people on their Facebook were seeing the same thing. Another person responds with, "I saw it too. I wanted to record it, but I was driving, and when I got home 5 minutes later, there was only one moon left." I survived a heart attack, but everything changed. This is something that I haven't shared with anyone directly. I once sent it in to a podcast that covers eerie stories in my home country, but this is the first time I'm telling it in full from my own perspective. So, here it goes. A little context. I was born with a heart condition that causes my heart to race uncontrollably. Sometimes it escalates into something that mimics or triggers a heart attack. I've had several episodes throughout my life, most of which have landed me in the emergency room for a few days at a time. A few years ago, it happened again. I was in the ambulance on my way to the hospital, and I just knew. I could feel death coming for me. It's hard to describe, but there was this moment of acceptance. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't sad. I just made peace with it. And the next thing I remember, I was waking up in a hospital bed. I don't know if my heart actually stopped. No one ever could really confirm that. But I know something changed, because when I woke up, I felt off. Not sick, but just different. Like I had woken up in my body, but something wasn't quite right. It felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. Like I was in a life that was mine, but not mine at the same time. I didn't have my phone on me, but I wanted to let somebody know that I was okay. I still had a few phone numbers memorized. My boyfriend's, my dad's, my sister's. I borrowed a phone and I called my boyfriend first. And when he answered, I almost cried with relief. Just hearing his voice was comforting. I told him something like, "Hey, it's me. I had another heart thing and I'm at the hospital, but I'm okay now." I expected him to rush over or at least say something reassuring, but instead, there was silence. And then he said, Listen, I'm sorry you're in the hospital, and it sounds like you really know me, but I don't know who this is." I thought he was joking. I laughed a little and said, "It's me, Lisa, your girlfriend. I made dinner for you and your daughter just 2 days ago. Come on, stop messing." And then he said, dead serious, "I'm married to a Laura. I don't know who you are. Please don't call me again." I was frozen. That didn't make any sense. What I did know was that before him and I met, he had an ex-wife named Laura. I'd spent months with him. I knew him. I knew his daughter. I knew all their favorite foods, their routines, their little personal stories that I couldn't possibly have invented. I hung up. And when I got back home, things in my apartment were wrong. Not insanely, completely wrong, but just slightly off. My pictures were in different places. Some things were missing. And a few small changes that added up to a sick feeling in my stomach. I checked my Facebook and I saw that we weren't even friends anymore. His status still showed that he was married to Laura, his ex-wife. I questioned everything. Had I made it all up? Was I mentally unstable? But no. I remembered way too many details. It wasn't possible that I just imagined all of it. And yet, no one else remembered what I remembered. Even my family, some things were different. My mom, for example, in my old life, she died at 44. But in this one, she passed at 50. She got more years here, and I'm grateful for that. And this is a detail that stuck with me ever since I woke up. The feeling of being misplaced has never really gone away. It still lives in me, like a quiet hum just beneath everything else. Like I'm slightly out of alignment with this world. I've struggled with depression since that day, trying to come to terms with the possibility that I died in that ambulance and somehow woke up in a nearly identical, but not quite the same version of my life. That maybe I shifted. Then, about 2 months ago, I signed up for Tinder. And there he was, my boyfriend, the one who didn't remember me. We matched, and we're dating now. He doesn't recognize me, not really, but he does say that my voice sounds slightly and strangely familiar. He just can't figure out from where. He doesn't remember our shared dinners, his daughter's jokes, or the way that we used to laugh together. But I do. I remember everything. I haven't told him yet, and honestly, I don't know if I ever will. Who would believe it? But every single day, I wonder, did I die? And if I did, why did I come back here? To a life that's so similar, yet just slightly out of sync. The hospital. I've known about Reddit for years, but I've only found this subreddit recently. And after reading some of your stories, I finally feel comfortable sharing one of mine. This happened about 8 years ago, and it still lives in the back of my mind. I'm a 35-year-old anesthetist from Egypt. At the time of this incident, I was working in a small hospital in the rural city of Rosetta. You might know it as the place where the famous Rosetta Stone was discovered. The hospital is a 5-floor building. The ER and the casualty department are on the ground floor. The wards and labs are on the middle floors, and the dormitories are up on the 5th. That's where I was staying at the time. The hospital was undergoing maintenance, and that day I was on duty, but nothing was scheduled in the operating theater, so I was in my room on the 5th floor browsing the web on my netbook. That's when the janitor knocked on my door. He told me that some new furniture, like beds and wardrobes, were being delivered and asked me to step out of the room until they finished replacing the old stuff. I left and went to the TV room nearby. Not long after, the hospital's PA system called my name, asking me to report immediately to the emergency department. Before I even moved, a security guard came running down the hall. He looked alarmed and said there had been a massive road traffic accident involving a school bus. They needed everyone. Doctors, nurses, anyone down in the ER now. I hurried back to my room. The new furniture was already there, which struck me as surprisingly fast. I shut the door and I ran down to the ER. And that's when things got strange. As soon as I walked into the ER, I froze. The walls were now blue with silver decorations, and I remembered them being green just that morning. I asked a nurse mid-procedure, when did they repaint this place? I joked, is the whole hospital getting a makeover? She gave me a confused look and said, what new color? It's always been like this. I thought, okay, that's a little weird, but I shook it off. There were children everywhere, many of them injured, and some burned. The school bus had caught fire, and the place was chaos. Doctors rushing from patient to patient, surgeons calling out for supplies, nurses charting and assisting. But even beyond that, something still felt wrong. There were so many faces that I didn't recognize. I'd worked in that hospital for years and knew almost everyone. Yet, I kept seeing people that I'd never met before. I started asking around, casually at first. Who's that guy assisting in OR number 2? Is he new? But the replies were always the same. I would hear, you don't know him? He's been here for years. Or, yeah, she's even eaten lunch with us before. What? I thought. I pushed it aside and kept working. The children needed more help than I did right then. I focused on what I was trained to do. Dose calculations, IVs, anesthetics, but I was operating on autopilot. Eventually, after a few grueling hours, things began to calm down. I stepped outside for a breath of air, and that's when I lost my grip on everything that I thought I knew. The hospital in Rosetta is near the Nile River, specifically the Rosetta branch of the Nile. I've seen that view dozens of times, but when I stepped outside, it wasn't the Nile. It was the Mediterranean Sea. The sea, right outside the hospital. Rosetta is close to the coast, yes, but not that close. You don't see the sea from the hospital. I started scanning the buildings around us. Some I recognized and some I didn't. And that view was completely wrong. And that's when I started to feel panic. I ran back into the ER and I asked a few colleagues, do you see what's outside? That's the Mediterranean, right? And they all looked at me strangely. Yes, it always is. What's going on with you? I now realize that I was spiraling. I tried calling my parents and I got no answer. I looked through my phone to call a close colleague, a more senior anesthetist that I considered a mentor and father figure. His name wasn't in my contacts though, and I asked around for his number, but nobody had heard of him. And that's when the fear started to turn physical. My hands started trembling. My legs were barely holding me upright. I knew that I wasn't dreaming. I was fully alert, 100% lucid, and I had just spent the last couple of hours in a busy ER working on real patients. This was happening. I made a snap decision. I needed to leave. I needed to go home. I needed to see someone, anyone, who could confirm that I hadn't lost my mind. I ran back up to my room on the 5th floor to change and grab my things, and the moment I opened the door, I froze again. The new furniture that they had just put in was gone. Everything seemed to be back to normal. The old bed, the old wardrobe, exactly how I'd left it that morning. I stood there, totally disoriented, and then I heard a voice calling me. It was the security guard. He told me that there had been a big accident involving a school bus and they needed every available doctor down in the ER. I silently stared at him, and he continued on, explaining that the PA system was down due to maintenance, and that's why they were calling doctors individually. I nodded and said I'd head down. He asked if anyone else was in the dorms, and I said I wasn't sure. I looked out the window, and I could see the Nile. It was back. I descended the stairs in a fog, heart pounding, knees weak. I walked into the ER and I saw the exact same kids that I had just helped, with the same injuries and the same old green walls that I knew, with no new faces, only the familiar crew that I worked with every single day. People kept asking if I was okay. I said I looked pale and shaky. And for the next few days, I was not okay. I had nightmares. I couldn't think straight. I took a week off to get my bearings. And to this day, I've never had another experience like it. I'm not on any medications, and there was no signs that I was hallucinating. I was completely functional and fully coherent, and I can still remember every detail, especially the children. I've only told this story to my mentor and later on to my wife. Even now, as I'm typing this out, it brings back the same eerie feelings. So, I thought I'd share it here. Maybe someone else has been where I was. Maybe someone else has seen a different version of their world and came back like I did. What happens when something appears that shouldn't exist? I've been house sitting for the past week, and over that time, I've walked through the house more times than I can count. Every room, every surface, it's all stayed exactly the same. Nothing ever out of place. Nothing strange. Until today. I was cleaning the dog's dish, heading back toward the dining room like I've done so many times before. But this time, I stopped cold in the doorway. There, sitting on the dining room table, was a clear glass with about an inch of water in it. I froze, staring at it. That glass hasn't been there, and I'm sure of it. I would have noticed. I always notice things like that, and to be clear, no one else has been in the house but me. I mean, no visitors, no deliveries, no reason for anyone else to be here. I approached the glass, slowly, and I checked the rim. There were no lip smudges, but there were, barely visible, what looked like small fingerprints on the glass. I haven't touched it, and honestly, I don't plan to. Now, I feel like someone might say, maybe you just left it there and forgot. But here's the thing. I never use regular glasses. I always drink from my own insulated water bottle, and I remember putting it in the fridge just before I started to clean, so I know I wasn't carrying a glass around. This one detail, the glass of water that wasn't there before, has me so uneasy in a way that I can't quite explain. It's such a small thing, but sometimes it's the smallest things that mess with your head the most. tiny specks of light are landing on me. Since January 6th, I've had two occurrences that I can't explain. Both times, something tiny, about the size of a metal tip of a ballpoint pen, appeared in midair and floated downward in a pattern that can only be described as dancing. The first one was bright red. It was steady, not blinking, and it floated down gently until it landed on my left arm. As soon as it touched me, it disappeared. I didn't feel scared, just oddly relieved. The moment felt peaceful, but also completely bewildering. Still, I wanted to be cautious. I searched online for possible explanations, but I only found things like ocular migraines or signs of neurological issues. So I made an eye doctor appointment and even replaced my carbon monoxide detectors just to rule out anything dangerous. Everything checked out fine. And, honestly, I almost forgot about the whole thing. And then tonight happened. I was sitting on the couch in our living room when, from about 15 feet up near the ceiling, I saw it again. This time, a tiny white speck. But unlike the red one, this one was blinking, almost like a soft strobe. It floated downward in that same graceful dancing motion. And here's the part that really confirms it for me. As it drifted down between me and my son, he looked over and said, "Mom, do you see that? What is it?" I wasn't imagining it. He saw it too. And just like before, it landed, this time on my right arm, and vanished. I'm left entirely confused, but more than that, I feel wonder. It's not a symptom of exhaustion or dehydration. It's not a carbon monoxide leak, and it's not something that I simply hallucinated. This time, I have confirmation. Someone else witnessed it with me. They're beautiful, these little lights, and I can't stop thinking about them. My mom asked me if I felt anything when they landed, and the truth is, yes, I did. I felt a sense of calm, curiosity, and awe. I've made a mental note to track whether anything changes after these experiences, but for now, I'm just trying to understand what it could be. If anyone has any insight into what this might be, or has experienced something similar, please let me know. I'm still searching for answers. Spontaneous human invisibility. Something weird has been happening to me for about 10 to 15 years now, and I still can't find a logical explanation for it. So, I figured I'd just put it out there. Has anyone else ever been told they've disappeared? The first time it happened was several years ago while I was fishing at my favorite trout stream. My fiancée at the time, let's just call her Chloe, was with me. She had recently broken her leg and was in a cast using crutches. She was going stir-crazy, stuck indoors all day, so she wanted to do something outside. We drove out to a spot that I know like the back of my hand, and she decided to sit on a large rock and read while I walked downstream along a narrow path that runs right along the edge of the creek. At the end of that path, about 300 yards from where we parked, is a small parking lot for Appalachian Trail hikers. It's a single-file trail, just wide enough for one person. After about an hour, I started heading back to check on Chloe, only to find that she wasn't on the rock anymore. I checked the car, I called out her name, but got nothing. Thinking maybe she went into the bushes to stretch her legs or use the bathroom, I walked back the way that I came, following the creek. I kept fishing as I moved toward the AT parking lot, where I found her, crying hysterically. She told me that she'd gotten called into work and was trying to find me so we could leave. She said she'd called out my name over and over, yet I never heard a thing. Eventually, she decided to come looking for me. But here's the problem. I was standing on the bank the entire time. I never waded into the water. I never crossed the stream. I was on the path. Now there's absolutely no way that she could have passed me without physically bumping into me. But she insisted that I was nowhere to be found. And that wasn't the last time something like this happened. Over the years, there have been moments where people are genuinely startled to see me, claiming that I wasn't there just seconds earlier. One of the more intense examples happened just about a year ago. I was sitting in my office at work, not facing my desk, just leaning back in my chair. A coworker who regularly uses my computer came in and, without even looking, sat down right on me. She screamed, jumped up, and swore up and down that the chair had been empty. She was pale and shaking. And this is someone that I trust, someone reliable. And the chair wasn't exactly camouflaged. It's black. And I was wearing a powder blue shirt and jeans. I certainly was not blending in. I've tried writing it off as a coincidence or practical jokes that just aren't funny. But 15 years is a long time for a prank, especially one involving different people in different places who don't even know each other. I've done some research and I've looked into explanations, time slips, dimension shifts, astral projection, but I don't know, none of them really seem to fit. I've never lost any time. I've never blacked out. I don't feel particularly off when these things happen. From my perspective, everything is completely normal. And maybe that's the weirdest part. I'm just as disturbed to hear that I disappeared as the people who swear that they couldn't see me. And just for the record, I'm in good physical and mental health. I've never seen a ghost or a UFO or Bigfoot. I have no psychic powers. I don't drink or do drugs, not even prescription ones. So, if anyone has any clue about what the heck is going on, I'm all ears. First the shower head, then the rearview mirror. This happened just last week in California. It was the middle of the night when I had what I can only describe as a horrific experience. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in my apartment. My heart was racing. I immediately got up and walked around, checking every room, but I didn't see anyone. Then, I realized something stupid. I had left the front door unlocked. I locked it right away. I did another sweep of the place just to be sure, and then I went back to sleep. A few hours later, I woke up again to the same noises. This time, I stayed still in bed, trying to just listen. The footsteps eventually stopped, but then my bedroom door creaked open ever so slightly. In the faint hallway light, I saw the outline of a person, just a black shape standing there. I froze. I didn't make a sound. I just waited. Then the figure said one word: 0. It sounded like any ordinary man's voice, calm, human. but something about it was still completely wrong. I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and turned on every light in the apartment. Again, nothing. Not a single soul. I double-checked all the locks, this time making sure to lock my bedroom door too. And I sat in bed for a long time, just waiting for something else to happen. Eventually, I must have dozed off. In the morning, I was still shaken, but trying to push past it. I got up and went to take a shower, and when I turned on the water, it sprayed straight up into the ceiling. I looked at the shower head, and it had been turned a full 180 degrees, completely upside down. And that's when I realized the only place that I didn't check the night before was behind the shower curtain. And there's no reason that I would have turned the shower head like that, right? Why would I? I tried to shake it off and go about my day, but something obviously was wrong. Something still feels wrong when I think about it. Then, yesterday, I got into my car to head to class, and I noticed my rearview mirror had also been turned completely upside down. That is when I stopped trying to find rational explanations. For a moment, I wondered if I had somehow been sleepwalking. But I've never been a sleepwalker in all of my 20-something years. And apparently, it's almost unheard of to start sleepwalking out of nowhere in your 20s. So now I'm just stuck. I have no idea what's going on. I'm not well versed in anything supernatural, so I feel like I'm totally out of my element here. Is there a spirit or an entity that turns things upside down? Is this some kind of omen? Do you think that I'm being messed with or, I don't know, followed? I would genuinely love to hear anyone's thoughts, because at this point, I'm freaked out and I don't know what to do. Can a phone show you what hasn't happened yet? Kind of a short story here. A couple of years ago, I decided to go to trade school to study diesel mechanics. I worked during the day, so I took night classes. During the first week, once everyone had gotten familiar with our classmates and our instructors, we were let out for the night as usual. As I was getting ready to head home, one of the guys in my class invited me and another student to grab some food at a restaurant down the road. I said sure, and I followed them to a Mexican place right next door to the school. We got a booth, we sat down, and I started scrolling through TikTok and checking Snapchat stories on my phone. When the waitress came over, I sat my phone down for a second to give her my order. Right after that, I picked my phone back up and turned it on, and for just a split second, I saw a picture of a totaled white Chevy. It flashed on the screen, and then my phone turned itself off. Now that part wasn't terribly strange. My phone sometimes did that. So, I turned it back on and started searching through my apps to figure out where that photo had come from. I looked through TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, but I couldn't find anything that matched. I figured it must have been a random TikTok that I missed right before the phone shut off. Then, about 20 minutes later, the guy who had invited us to eat started telling a story about how he used to drive a white Chevy that got totaled when an 18-wheeler ran a stop sign and hit him. He proceeded to pull out a photo of the wreckage, and it was the exact same picture that I had seen flash on my screen earlier. Even from the same angle, that same white Chevy, same damage too. I have no idea how that could have happened, and it still weirds me out every time I think about it. The sock swap and the language flip. So, this morning, I was getting ready for my usual walk with my neighbor and our dogs. I was about to put on my socks. They're black socks with little red hearts on the sides. And this is important, I always make sure the hearts are on the outside of each ankle. I hate when I mess that up. It really bugs me when the hearts are facing inward. Anyway, today, something was off. I pulled them out and immediately noticed that the hearts were both on the same side, like I had two right socks, which obviously shouldn't be possible because I only have the one pair of these socks. I stared at them, turning them around, trying to make sense of it, but it just didn't add up. So I took a picture. Still weirded out, I decided to take a closer look. I took off the left sock to examine it, and the moment that I had it in my hand, the heart was in the right place again. Like it had changed positions the second I pulled it off. Now, both socks were back to normal. One heart on each ankle, facing outward, like always. I came here so I could post about it and share it with you, and then something even stranger happened. All of the posts were suddenly in French. I live in France, and I'm a French speaker, so it's not that strange in itself, but I remember clearly that I always read posts here in English. It was enough to make me pause and start doubting myself. I thought, maybe I've just forgotten what language I actually read in. When you bounce between two languages all the time, sometimes it does get a little blurry. So I let it go, and I kept reading. But then, another twist. After reading a few posts and heading back to the main dashboard to finally share my story, all of the posts were back in English again. I didn't change any settings. I didn't tap on anything. They just switched back on their own. Between the sock situation and the random language flip, I don't know what's going on today. But the strange world we live in, isn't it? This next story was sent in from Bob from Arkansas. Bob writes, "It was an ordinary weekend. I was lying in bed, playing on my phone like I usually do. I put on a YouTube video about quantum entanglement to fall asleep to. Sometime, at around 3 in the morning, I woke up suddenly with this strange, compelling thought. I've forgotten my Android swipe passcode. Half asleep, I reached over and grabbed my phone. I entered my swipe code, but it didn't work. I tried 3 more times, and still nothing. Now, my phone told me that it was locked for 1 minute. I waited, and then I used my thumbprint instead, and that worked. Once I was in, I went to settings to disable the swipe lock altogether. But, of course, Android makes you enter the current swipe code to disable it. I tried again, thinking that maybe I had just swiped it wrong, but I got the same results. Then, I tried changing the swipe pattern, and I had the same issue. It asked for the old code, and it wouldn't accept what I knew was the right one. So now I'm sitting there thinking, this is crazy. I've used the exact same swipe code on my last 2 phones for 5 years, probably 10 times a day. Doing the math, that's over 18,000 swipes. It's burned into my muscle memory. I could see the pattern clearly in my head, and I thought that maybe I just messed it up because it was dark, or because I had just woken up and it was in the middle of the night. I tried again, still failed. Now the phone said I had to wait 2 minutes for it to unlock. I waited, and I kept trying. Each time, it would lock me out for longer, until it finally told me that I'd have to wait 1 full hour. At that point, I got up and just started getting ready for work. Later on, that morning, I tried again, and this time, the phone warned me that I had only 4 attempts left before it would factory reset, and I'd need to wait 2 more hours to try again. I started to panic. I need my phone for work, and I hadn't backed it up in a long time. I tried my thumbprint again, but now that wasn't working either. I started researching online, trying to find anything about this happening, and I couldn't find any mention of this kind of issue. Nothing that matched what I was experiencing. No workaround. No fix. It seemed like I was stuck. Desperate, I printed out a pattern of swipe dots on paper, roughly the size of my phone screen, so I could practice without risking more failed attempts. Every time I used muscle memory, I drew the exact same pattern. But no matter what I tried, the phone just wouldn't accept it. Eventually, I tried other variations, similar swipe combinations, but none of them worked. And finally, it happened. I ran out of attempts, and the phone factory reset. Now, I can accept that maybe there was a software glitch, or maybe even a virus. I can also accept, even as unlikely as it seems, that maybe I had some freak lapse in memory, even after 5 years of using the same pattern. But here's what I can't explain. I woke up in the middle of the night, already knowing something was wrong with my swipe code before I even touched the phone. And that's the part that still kind of haunts me. My only explanation is a glitch. Thank you, Bob, for sending that in. This next one comes from another email submission from Dar. Thanks, Dar, for sending these in. There's 2. I have a master bathroom connected to my bedroom. Back then, the bathroom was tiled, but the rest of the bedroom, including the area between the bathroom and the bedroom door, was carpeted. One day, I was in the bathroom putting on a hoop earring when it slipped from my hand and fell to the floor. I heard a very clear clink sound as it hit the tile. I searched everywhere in that small bathroom. I looked under the vanity, I checked in every corner, and found nothing. After about 5 minutes of searching, I gave up. As I walked out of the bathroom and into my bedroom to leave the house, I found the earring near the bedroom door, the one that leads to the hallway. Now, for that to happen, the earring would have had to roll out of the tiled bathroom, down a small carpeted hallway, and around a corner, which was also carpeted, all the way to the bedroom door. And that's never made sense to me. It wasn't the first time something like this happened either. I've had other small things disappear and reappear in odd places, but after what happened next, I decided to sage the house. When my daughter was about 5 years old, she started telling me that her and her older brother, he's 3 years older, that she sometimes saw weird shadows in her room at night. It scared her enough that she'd come sleep in my room from time to time. At the time, I didn't really think much of it. I just chalked it up to her big imagination. She is a very creative kid. I figured maybe it was just the headlights from a neighbor's house casting shadows through the window. Her room did face that side, after all. But I've since learned, don't brush off what kids say, especially when they're scared. When she was around 6, she had a favorite toy, a purple Beanie Baby hippo. She slept with it every night. At the time, I worked night shifts, and one morning, after coming home at around 6 a.m. and sending the sitter home, I went into the bedroom and I found my daughter already in my bed, upset and almost crying. I sat down beside her and I asked what was wrong. And she looked at me and she said, "The fox took my hippo." Apparently, the shadows hadn't been confined to just her bedroom. She said she saw the shadow of a fox on my wall, and after that, her hippo disappeared. I told her it was probably a dream and that we'd look for the hippo as soon as we could. I really believed that it had just fallen onto the bedding somewhere. It was still dark, so I turned on the lights and we started searching. We pulled all the covers off of the bed, we looked underneath, and we even took every pillowcase off as well. No hippo. I checked my bathroom too, just in case she had carried it in there. Nothing. She was still visibly upset, but I told her not to worry and that it would turn up. We both needed rest, so we laid back down. I put my arm around her to comfort her. About 10 minutes later, I moved my arm from around her and placed it between us, only to feel something there. I wrapped my hand around it and I immediately recognized the shape. It was the missing purple hippo. I got out of bed in shock and I turned the light back on to confirm exactly what I was holding. My daughter even sat up too, wondering what I was doing. Sure enough, it was her beanie baby, right there, between us. And we just looked at each other. I didn't want to scare her more, so I just smiled and said, "See, I told you it would turn up." But she's a smart kid. She knew that we had checked that exact spot thoroughly, over and over. That toy should not have been there. She was freaked out by it, and she didn't even want to touch it. I ended up putting the hippo in my closet, and after that, she told me she didn't want it anymore. And frankly, I kind of understood. I eventually donated it to Goodwill. I saged the house thoroughly after that, especially the bedrooms. And since then, we haven't had any more issues. My daughter even told me that the shadows stopped showing up. If you're dealing with anything strange in your home, I always recommend sage and prayer. They work. Thank you, Dar, for sending that in. Hopefully you didn't pass along a centuries-old curse to some unwitting Goodwill shopper. I've got another email submission from Renee called Butcher Shop Glitch in the Matrix Story. Renee writes, Hey, I just found your channel this past week and subscribed. Oh, thank you. Really enjoying the stories and I love your format. Please tell me you like the intro as well. Great intro too. Yes. Thought I'd send you a recent experience of mine. I've experienced strange things all my life, usually in clusters over months at a time. It doesn't weird me out at all. I'm used to it. As an open-minded skeptic, I find the unknown fascinating and fun to try to figure out, even if it gets a little creepy. There are usually practical explanations, but sometimes things remain a mystery. I'm intrigued by it all. Last week, I went to my local butcher shop to stock up for monthly meal ingredients, as usual. It's always a busy place, and they're known in our community for their quality local meats and excellent customer service. It was the day before the Easter long weekend, so it was even busier than usual. I'm not a stranger there, and the staff are always super friendly. They have a ticketing system where you pull a tab with a number, and the next available worker calls the next number for service. There's one woman working there who's always as pleasant and engaging with customers as the rest of the staff. Whenever I see her behind the coolers, she's kind, pleasant, and has a genuine smile. Well, that is, until she calls my number. As soon as I step up with my numbered tab, something changes. She still maintains her impeccable customer service, but something is different. Her smile turns kind of vacant, and her demeanor changes from light-hearted kindness to almost robotic professionalism. She's polite and respectful, but all of her friendliness disappears. I'm old enough to know that, in life, sometimes there are people whose energies just don't mix. For no apparent reason, some people just don't jive. I've always shrugged off her coldness toward me as that. None of the other staff are like this toward me, and in the big picture, it's really no big deal in my world. I'm typically a naturally warm, kind, and patient person, so when I see her, I smile and remain friendly with her regardless. The day before Good Friday, I arrived at the butcher shop where a man opened the door and motioned for me to enter ahead of him. I thanked him and I went inside. I grabbed my number from the ticketer and settled in with the rest of the crowded shop for a longer wait than usual. When my number was finally called, I found the non-friendly worker and I both stepping up to the opposite sides of the cooler. As usual, I smiled a warm smile and I asked her how her day was going. And as usual, she replied with a polite but impersonal, "Good, what can I get you?" I told her all of the things on my list. She nodded and reached into the cooler to get the first item, and then turned around to face the counters against the back wall where they weigh, wrap, and price the meat items. They had full staff working, and it was a hectic kind of busy, but they all shared the space and moved in an efficient way together. I found myself marveling at how smoothly they all worked in unison. When she was done with my first item, the worker turned back to me and asked for the next item on my list, even though I'd already told her everything that I needed. I repeated myself, figuring it's busy and she's doing one thing at a time so she doesn't miss anything. No problem. It's probably for the better anyway. I watched her turn, weigh, wrap, and price the second item. After that, she turned around again and came back to serving me. But instead of asking me for my third item, her eyes started scanning the shop full of customers. She leaned around, searching the whole customer area from behind the cooler. I stood where I had been the whole time, directly in front of her, patiently waiting. But her eyes seemed to look right through me as they darted around the room. I figured she must have gotten sidetracked. Maybe one of the other staff had asked her to look for someone else in the customer area, or maybe she was looking for more staff to come help. I kept watching her as she searched the room, ready for her to continue my order when she was done doing whatever she was doing. After about a minute of her eyes darting around, I realized she might be looking for me and having one of those can't see something when it's right in front of your face kind of moments. So I decided to speak up and flag her attention. But at that exact moment that I thought this, and before I could lift my hand or open my mouth to speak, the customer standing directly to my left, almost touching shoulder to shoulder with me, asked the worker across the cooler, "Are you looking for the woman that was just standing here?" Now, this normally wouldn't be remarkable, but it stood out as very strange to me. I spend a lot of time in solitude, so I'm extremely sensitive about personal space, especially in crowds. This other customer was definitely not standing that close to me before she spoke. I absolutely would have known that she was there, or at the very least felt her moving up beside me. But no, she was just there all of a sudden. I wasn't sure which woman who was just standing here the customer was referring to, but the worker behind the cooler said yes and nodded. The customer responded with, "She went over there," and pointed across the store behind us to the checkout counter near the exit. Now, the worker immediately went around the store perimeter behind the row of coolers all the way around to the checkouts, scanning the room full of customers the whole time for whomever she was searching. I looked in the direction the other customer pointed, but it wasn't clear to me who she may have been pointing to. At this point, I think to myself, okay, The worker isn't looking for me after all, since I'd been standing right where I was for a while, and they're looking for someone who moved to the exit. Must be like I thought. The worker got sidetracked with someone else, and the other customer happened to see who it was. No problem. I can be happy to wait, it's fine. After all, I know how it can get when you're trying to do two things at once on a busy day in retail, and I wasn't in a hurry. Besides, it was kind of amusing watching this whole thing play out. From the other side of the store, I watched the worker shake her head. She made her way from the checkout back to us, returning to the cooler in front of me, and she looked directly at me now and said, "There you are. I turned to take the rest of your order, but you disappeared." At that point, completely amused now with a smile on my face, I replied, "I haven't moved an inch." Then, it was like time slowed down almost to a complete stop, and I sunk into a weird state of what I can only describe as pure awareness. The first thing I noticed was that the expression on the worker's face hadn't changed when I said I hadn't moved. There was no sign of surprise or confusion, no amusement, not even irritation. I found it strange, but thought that maybe she just had a great poker face, or was just so focused on her work that she didn't really want to think about it. I then became aware that the customer that had been next to me at my shoulder was no longer there. In fact, I didn't see her in the shop at all anymore. She was a distinctive-looking woman with long, dark, almost jet-black hair, striking features, and big energy, not easily missed. But now, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. I figured she must have gotten her order and was on her way out. We were at the back of the store, and she physically could not have gotten through the crowded shop to the front checkout and then exited the doors in just those few seconds. It then dawned on me that this woman, the other customer who had been so close to me, stood almost touching my shoulder yet seemingly wasn't aware that I was there. She apparently had seen me at some point, because she referred to me as the woman who had just been standing there. She spoke as though I had moved when I actually hadn't. She thought that I'd moved toward the exit when I was still right next to her. This was all so weird. The worker had interacted with this woman while I had disappeared. I wondered if the other woman had disappeared to the worker now that I was visible again. She had definitely disappeared to me. I felt like I was floating in this weird time blip. Nothing made sense, but I don't know, it didn't feel scary. I was just more amused and intrigued than anything else. Suddenly, I could hear the worker asking for the next thing on my shopping list, and my sense of time snapped back to normal. I was yanked out of this slowed state of awareness, and all of a sudden, it was as if nothing had happened at all. The worker completed the rest of my order normally, and my packages were soon wrapped and ready to go. I made my way to the checkout without further incident. Upon leaving the store, I sat in my vehicle with so many questions. Had I really disappeared? And why? I had already had the interaction with the man on the way in, and the worker had started my order, so I wasn't invisible the whole time. I wished that I would have thought to look around at the rest of the crowd of customers behind me to see if anyone else noticed me in those moments of being invisible to the worker, or to see if anyone else saw the woman beside me. I get the sense that while she pointed, others looked as well, but, I can't be too certain. I wondered who the customer to my left was, and how she just appeared out of thin air. Why did she and I seem to switch places, when she was visible and I was not, and then vice versa? Why did she point out that I had gone toward the checkout, when she was standing, almost touching her shoulder to mine, and I hadn't moved. Did anyone else notice that she suddenly disappeared too? And where did she go? I've had experiences of things and people appearing and disappearing around me countless times in my life, but I don't recall ever having the experience of being the one to disappear. I'd love to know if anyone else has experienced anything like this or can help me make sense of it. It's been a whole week now and I'm still baffled, but it's interesting to think that I was the glitch this time. Thank you again to Renee for sending that one in. Have you ever had a moment so strange, so wildly coincidental that it made you stop and wonder, what are the odds? Maybe you bumped into a friend in a city that neither of you live in. Maybe a random thought popped into your head and then it immediately took place in front of you. Well, what if you encountered the same stranger in 3 completely unrelated moments stretched across 27 years, where every incident has one weird thing in common? That's exactly what happened to a 19th century poet named Émile Deschamps. And the story, known today as the plum pudding paradox, is one of the strangest, most unnerving coincidences ever recorded. Welcome to another segment of the No Way Files. The year is 1805. France is in the midst of political upheaval. Napoleon is rising. The streets of Paris are alive with debate, scandal, and revolution. And somewhere in the middle of it all is a young, wide-eyed poet named Émile Deschamps. Now, Deschamps was only 15 years old at the time. His life was quiet, routine, until the day he was introduced to something utterly foreign to him. A dish that he'd never tasted before: plum pudding. Now, to the British, plum pudding was a holiday staple, but to the French, it was weird. Dense, spiced, sweet, very strange. But what really made the moment stick in Deschamps' memory wasn't the pudding itself. It was the man who introduced it to him. A stranger, older, polite, very not French. His name was Monsieur de Fontgibu. He was, as Deschamps later described him, a gentleman of foreign manner and impeccable timing. They shared the dessert, they exchanged pleasantries, and that was it. Just one brief, odd memory, a dessert and a stranger. For most people, that would be the end. But for Émile Deschamps, it was only the beginning. Fast forward with me 10 years. It's 1815. Napoleon has now fallen. France is reshuffling itself again. And Deschamps, now in his mid-20s, is a rising figure in Parisian literary circles. One day, he walks into a restaurant, a quiet, unremarkable place. He opens the menu, and there he sees plum pudding. He remembers the strange man from a decade ago and the foreign dessert that he was introduced to, and he decides, on a whim, to order it again. Maybe out of nostalgia, maybe curiosity. The waiter shakes his head. "I'm sorry," he says, "we just served the last one." Émile asks, "Well, who was it served to?" None other than Monsieur de Fontgibu. Same man, same dessert, same random collision of lives just 10 years later. Deschamps doesn't approach him this time. He's too stunned. The moment that he's currently sitting in is just too bizarre. What could he even say? For most people, a coincidence like that would live in your head forever. But Deschamps, his story wasn't over yet. Let's fast forward a little more. 1832. Émile Deschamps is almost 42 years old. He's a respected poet, thinker, and romantic. He's attending a private dinner party in Paris, one of those high society affairs where wine flows, conversation sparks, and every course is planned with precision. The final course of the evening is about to be served. And guess what's on the menu? Plum pudding. By this point, Deschamps has told his friends about the other two encounters, so when he sees the pudding, he laughs, and he tells the table, all that's missing is that Monsieur de Fontgibu. Everyone laughs. Good joke. It's a weird little story, but that's all. Until there's a knock at the door. The host excuses himself and returns with a look of total confusion. A man has wandered in, elderly, confused. He thought this house was hosting another dinner somewhere else entirely. He seems lost and apologetic. Can you guess who it is? Monsieur de Fontgibu. At this point, you're probably wondering, how? How could the same two men, who weren't friends, nor family, or even true acquaintances, end up in the same room eating the same rare dessert 3 times over nearly 3 decades? And why does that final encounter feel like something out of a movie script? Deschamps himself never tried to explain it. He simply recorded the events and left them for the world to wonder. But over time, the story became a symbol, a case study in something psychologist Carl Jung would later call synchronicity. If you don't know, synchronicity is meaningful coincidences with no apparent causal connection. They're not random chances. It's not just probability, but they're more like moments that feel orchestrated. Was this just an incredibly rare coincidence? Some sort of 3-act joke that took the universe almost 3 decades to tell? Or was it something deeper? A hint that time, memory, and reality isn't as stable as we like to think. This has been another segment of the No Way Files, where real events remind us that sometimes the world plays by rules that we don't understand. Did I just literally bump into a glitch? So, I was chilling in my bed, which is up on a mezzanine that spans about 5 meters, or just over 16 feet. The bed itself is 2 meters long and sits on one end of the space. There's about 3 meters of open floor to the side, where I have a TV and a couch. On the opposite side, there's this little protrusion from the wall. It supports the roof. It's always there, but I never bump into it. I know where it is, and I just instinctively avoid it without thinking. Now here's the weird part. I was lying on my bed, completely relaxed, just getting comfy. I shifted slightly to reposition myself, and suddenly, bam! I hit my head on absolutely nothing. Or at least what seemed like pure air. No warning, no edge of the bed, no low ceiling beam, just empty space where I've moved 100 times before with 0 issues. It was like I hit an invisible wall. Instantly, I sat up, totally freaked out, and I started scanning the space, trying to figure out what the heck I just collided with. The only physical object nearby that could possibly match the height was the wall protrusion from the roof support. But to have bumped into that from where I was lying, that would mean my bed, my body, or something would have to be in a completely different position than reality tells me that it is. And that just doesn't make sense. I was so rattled that I literally stood up and started inspecting everything. Did something glitch into the room? Did my sense of space just, collapse for a second? Was I out of sync with physical reality? There was nothing there. No objects, and no explanation. That's when I sat down and I came here to write this out. Because if that wall support is what I bumped into, then my entire sense of spatial awareness, and maybe even reality, is an illusion. Has anyone else experienced something like this? It feels unreal. Somebody in the comments asks, "Do you have a bruise or anything to show that you actually did bump your head?" OP responds with, "Yes, they can feel the bump on their head, and they're sure that a bruise would be visible if they shaved their head." Missing money appeared somewhere that it couldn't be. Back in 2014, my boyfriend and I had plans to go out to a bar for karaoke night. I can't remember which one of us originally had this $100 bill or who was supposed to hang on to it for the night, but we knew that we had it earlier in the evening. We were getting ready to head out, making sure that we had everything, like our phones, IDs, money. That's when we realized that neither of us had the $100 bill. There were only 3 people in the house: me, my boyfriend, and his dad. His dad was in the living room watching TV. He was older and still recovering from a back surgery, so he moved very slowly. There was no way that he had anything to do with the missing money. So my boyfriend and I tore apart our bedroom looking for it. We checked in the closet. We checked every box and bag and shoe on the floor. We looked under the bed, thinking that, maybe it fell and got blown under there by the fan or the AC. We checked every hamper, every drawer, and I went through my purse at least 4 times. We even checked the bathroom and the trash can. The rest of the house didn't make any sense to search. We hadn't been anywhere else with the money. At that point, we were frustrated, confused, and honestly just defeated. We searched everywhere. Eventually, we gave up on going out. My boyfriend, who's a singer and really wanted to go, was just as upset as I was. I decided to call it a night and go to bed. And that's when it got weird. After I got into bed, I felt something odd touching my leg. I lifted the sheet and the bedspread, and there it was, the $100 bill. It was under the sheet, right in the center of the bed. Now, here's the thing. We made the bed that morning. And when I say made, I don't mean we just pulled the covers up and called it good. I mean like a hotel-style made. Tucked sheets, top sheet folded back. The bedspread was folded neatly with the pillows overlapping the fold. And then the bedspread folded back up over the pillows. On top of that, 2 pillow shams, a couple of throw pillows, and a bolster. There is no way that $100 bill could have ended up there without someone noticing, especially since the money wasn't even in play until that evening. And I'm absolutely sure that it wasn't my boyfriend just messing with me. Here's 2 solid reasons why. 1, he was just as frustrated as I was about not being able to go out, maybe even more. Karaoke night meant something to him. He's a musician, and he was really looking forward to it. And 2, he's not the kind of person who could have remade the bed the way that I did. He's not that detail-oriented. If he lifted the sheet or rearranged the pillows, I would have noticed. The blanket would have looked off as well, and the pillows would have been out of place. And he hates that I tucked the sheets in. He certainly wouldn't have retucked them. So how did that money get in there? I still think about it, and It makes no sense. I swore it was ruined, but now it's brand new. When I was a teenager, I had this plaid wool coat from PacSun that I absolutely loved. It was one of those staple pieces that I wore all the time. It was warm, it looked cool, and it was just the right kind of worn in. One day, though, I totally wrecked it. I slipped and slid down on a muddy hill, one of those full-body, grass-in-your-shoes kind of falls. By the time I got up, the coat was completely covered in mud and grass stains. I mean, ruined. It looked like I had tried to wrestle the entire earth and lost. I remember thinking that I should take it to the dry cleaner, but I was super broke at the time. Dry cleaning was a luxury that I just couldn't justify. I shoved the coat in the back of my closet and honestly forgot about it. Life moved on. Months later, we ended up having to move out of the house due to a foreclosure. I was packing things up, going through the closet, and I pulled out the coat, and that's when I froze. It was clean. I mean, sparkling clean. There wasn't a speck of mud, no grass stains, nothing. I mean, it looked brand new, like it had never touched dirt in its life. I thought that maybe someone in my family had taken pity on me and cleaned it. But when I asked around, every single person acted like they didn't know what I was talking about. None of them even remembered the coat being dirty to begin with. My mom, my siblings, nobody had any idea what I was talking about, and they just shrugged it off. I still have the coat. It's been years now, and every time I see it in my closet, I think about that. I never found an explanation. I just know that something about it doesn't add up. It's not the wildest story, but it's definitely one that stuck with me. Why do these trees feel wrong? I'm not sure if this qualifies as a glitch in the Matrix, but it's been tickling my brain for a while now. I live in a small town tucked up in the mountains. It's quiet, familiar, and the kind of place where nothing changes much. Every couple of weeks for the last 5 years, I've made the same drive down the mountain to go into the big city to run errands. Things like groceries, appointments, stuff like that we just can't get done in town. This past summer, I was making that familiar trip when something caught my eye. A pine tree. But not just any pine tree. It was the most perfect tree I'd ever seen. It was perfectly straight, with impossible symmetry, towering like it had been hand-selected and planted by an artist. It stood out so much from the rest of the forest around it that I thought for a second it had to be one of those fake tree cell phone towers. But no, it was very real. It struck me because I've driven this route probably 100 times, and that tree had never caught my attention before, and I'm someone who notices things like that. But still, I chalked it up to maybe just overlooking it. Then, a few months later, sometime in the fall, I was driving to work along an entirely different road, one that I use every single day, and there it was again, another tree. Not the same one as before, but it still had that same perfect symmetry. Tall, narrow, and silhouetted just so against the early morning sky as I crested a hill, framed perfectly by the horizon as if someone had staged it. My breath caught in my chest for a second. Just like before, I couldn't believe that I'd never noticed it. And these were not newly planted trees either, I don't think. Each of them were close to 50 or 70 feet tall. Since then, I've been keeping my eyes peeled. I've seen other beautiful trees too, straight, tall, lit just right by the sun, but none of them feel quite like these two. The first one felt like it wanted to be seen. The second, like it had always been there, but in some other version of reality that I hadn't accessed until that moment. They had a presence to them, a quality that made them unforgettable. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, or maybe the world actually shifted ever so slightly, just enough for me to notice a tree that wasn't there before. Mug changed design between rooms. I experienced the occasional glitch once in a blue moon, and the latest one happened just last week, to my absolute delight. It started like any normal morning. I was relaxing in bed when my partner kindly offered to make me a coffee. From where I was lying, I could see straight into the kitchen. Our flat has an open layout, so I watched as he grabbed a mug and said, "You'll get the nice mug today." I perked up instantly when I saw which one he chose. My favorite Moomin mug. It's a bright orange design with little white creatures, and it was the very first in my small collection. None of the others look anything like it, which is why I love it so much. "Ooh, that's my favorite," I called out from bed, smiling. He brought the mug over. I sipped my coffee, and we chatted for a bit before he went into his office to start work. A little while later, I followed him in with my mug to talk about something. After we finished talking, I left, and then I realized that I'd forgotten my coffee on his desk. So I went back in to grab it, and that's when things got weird. I scanned his desk, and my mug wasn't there. In its place, though, were two other mugs, both ones that he uses pretty often. I blinked, confused, and I checked the living room just in case I'd already brought it back, but found nothing. So I returned to his office and shrugged, pointing at one of the mugs and said, "I guess this one's mine?" It was another Moomin mug, but not the one from earlier. This one had a completely different design, and as soon as I said it, I felt off. "Wait, didn't you pick the bright orange one?" I asked. He looked puzzled. He said, "I think I did," but then paused. "Oh, actually, I almost picked the gray one, but now I can't remember which one I went with." I stared at the unfamiliar mug in my hands, certain that something didn't add up. I distinctly remembered him walking across the kitchen holding the orange one. I even commented on how much I loved it. I saw it. So I went to check the cupboard. Nothing. Most of our mugs were in the dishwasher from the night before, so I opened it up, and there it was. The bright orange Moomin mug sitting in the back of the dishwasher, dry and untouched. I stood there staring at it for a minute, totally bewildered. How could it be in there when I was sure it was the mug that I was using earlier, the same one that I saw him pick up? At first, I thought maybe I was stuck in some brain fog or something confusing, but I remembered yesterday perfectly. I'd used one of his big mugs the day before, and I remember thinking how much I prefer my smaller Moomin mugs, and that's why the orange one had stood out. Little things like this don't shake me too much. If anything, they kind of thrill me. It's like the universe glitched for a moment, and I just happened to catch it in the act. So, yeah, I'm still drinking coffee, but now I'm side-eyeing the mugs a little more than usual. I get so stoked whenever something like this happens, so I thought I'd share this one. Second sister. This is something that happened to me years ago, maybe when I was 17. I told my family and a few friends, but I never thought to post about it until now. For some context, because my friend says locations can have an impact on this stuff, it all happened in the Ottawa Valley in Ontario, Canada. Leading up to the big event, I had been experiencing some pretty heavy deja vu. I'd been experiencing it on and off for years prior, but for the past couple of months, it had become a daily thing. So stark that I noticed it amidst my ridiculous high school life. Now, the day that it happened was a Sunday, and my family and I were getting ready to pack up the cottage and go home for the week. It was getting ready to rain, so the sky was cloudy and dark, and most of the other campers had already left the park, so it was like a ghost town. Well, I decided to take my dog for a little walk down to the lake before we leave, just to give him one last swim. Nothing necessarily feels off, other than a bit of worry that I might get caught in a downpour on my way there or back. So I take him to the lake, and it's maybe a 5-minute walk from the cottage, and I let him get in the water for a few minutes. When I decide that it's time to head back, I turn, and then my youngest sister runs out in front of me. At the time, she must have been 8 or 9, too young to be running around a trailer park alone. She was dressed in the same clothing as my sister that day. Not like even something that looked similar. It was an old hand-me-down dress shirt thing that used to be my other sister's. So me, being a brooding teen that had a hatred for my siblings, chose to yell at her to get back to the cottage. Obviously, not something a responsible sister would do. I probably should have walked her back myself, but I chose to yell instead. Well, this kid said nothing, gave me some sort of sickly sweet smile, and then turned back the way she came and ran off. There was another cottage beside me, so I couldn't see her actually leave towards our cottage, but I think nothing of it, letting my dog finish his sniffing around before leaving myself. I left probably only a minute later than she did, and there's a soccer field between the lake and our cottage, so if she had went right back to our cottage, I should have seen her running across the field, but I just assumed that she ran really fast or something. So I get back to the cottage, and I immediately tell my parents that my little sister had been running around the park all by herself, glaring at said sister who was now sitting on the couch doing a puzzle. She was also doing the puzzle when I left, but that was something I didn't pay attention to at the time. My dad, who was standing 5 feet away from her doing the leftover dishes, said that he hadn't seen her move the entire time I was gone. My mother, who was back and forth collecting laundry, confirmed this. I could understand if she had ran out of the cottage for a few minutes and then went right back without saying anything. That could be overlooked. But even running, the journey to the lake would take a couple of minutes. Then she stopped to look at me and then ran back. And at the speed that she might have been running, if she did return to the cottage and sat back on the couch immediately, she would have been huffing and puffing for air, and my dad surely would have noticed in the otherwise quiet cottage. She also looked completely fine and not out of breath like she should have when I returned. It was like she hadn't even moved at all. Some common things that my friends have tried to debunk it with are, well, maybe it was just a kid that looked similar to your sister. I can say with certainty that it absolutely was my sister that I saw down by the lake. She was wearing the exact same clothing. even down to her cringe pink Minnie Mouse Crocs. She had the same messy hair, same dimpled smile. It was her. Also, they say maybe your parents really just didn't notice that she left. And while that may be true, I think it would be pretty hard for them to both not notice a child missing in the main room of the cottage, or one coming back heaving air. She was a pretty out-of-shape kid, so running, even for a short distance, put her out of breath. And even when I came back, she looked fine. After this happened, all of that deja vu that I mentioned stopped completely for about 3 years. It's now only coming back to me after all this time, but maybe it happens every couple of months now instead of almost daily. I'd like to know what you guys think of this, as it's been haunting me for a long time. What if I did follow her or treated her with kindness instead of yelling? What would have happened? I often think of the yelling part as one of my biggest regrets because it seems like such a turning point in my teen years. Looking back, it kind of seems like a test of sorts, because once it happened, all of the weird phenomena that had been happening to me stopped. Did reality glitch in my girlfriend's room? This glitch in the Matrix has never made any logical sense to me, and probably it never will. It happened a few years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I had spent the night at my girlfriend's house and was getting ready to leave in the morning. Just before I left, she handed me her spare key, and I remember this part vividly. And I very clearly put it in my right jeans pocket. Not my jacket, not my bag, my right jeans pocket. I even gave it a little pat like I usually do, just to make sure that it was there. I gathered a few more of my things and started heading downstairs toward the front door. As I reached for the key to unlock the door, nothing. It wasn't there. I had just put that thing in my pocket. I double-checked and still got nothing. I turned my pocket inside out, and I even patted down the outside of my jeans. No key. I took my pants off completely and shook them out. Still no key. So now, I'm really confused. I start scanning the floor, thinking maybe I dropped it, even though I'd never heard anything fall. No luck. At this point, I wake my girlfriend up and I tell her what's going on. She gets up and joins the search. "Where did you put it?" she asks. I say I put it in my right pocket. She double checks all of my jean pockets herself, pats me down thoroughly, but finds nothing. We're both baffled, so we start tearing the room apart, every inch of it. We look under the bed, under the rug, inside bags, on every surface. Nothing. We did this for close to 15 or maybe 20 minutes, over and over. But that key was gone. I was getting frustrated and honestly was starting to feel like I was losing it. My mind, not the key. That was already lost. I knew exactly where I'd put it. Then, right as I was reaching the limit of my patience, I took a step toward the door and I felt something in my right front pocket. I stopped cold. I pressed my hand against the outside of my jeans, and there it was. The key. Just sitting there, like it had been there the whole time. I reached in and I pulled it out slowly. My girlfriend and I just stared at each other, speechless. We had both checked both of those pockets dozens of times by now. Turned them inside out, pat-downs, emptied the room. That key was not there, and now, suddenly, it was. With no explanation, of course. It was just there. And this wasn't even the first weird thing that happened in that room. Another time, we were lying in bed, talking, when a glass sitting on the nightstand suddenly shattered. No one had touched it. There were no vibrations, no noise. It just exploded on its own. I've joked that there might be some kind of dimensional portal in that room, but honestly, I have no clue. It still gives me chills when I think about it. Aluminum foil replaced itself. So, this just happened, and I have no explanation for it. Last week, I was cooking and using aluminum foil, or aluminium, for my UK friends. I had accidentally dropped the roll during this, and it was all unraveled now. I'm a broke college student living with 2 roommates, so I just re-rolled it as best as I could, and I put it away. As you can imagine, the roll was all screwed up and crinkled, but not unusable, and I didn't want to buy more unnecessarily. My roommate saw this happen, and we made a joke about it, and we moved on. A couple of days ago, I used the same roll. It was all crinkled as it should be. Well, today, I literally just went to use the roll again, and now it's completely normal. I asked my roommate if they replaced the foil, and they said no. It's the same amount of foil, with the same brand, same kind. It's just not screwed up anymore. So, yeah, I have no idea what happened. But hey, no complaints though. My foil is normal again. Somebody in the comments leaves 2 proposed suggestions. 1, your roommate actually did prank you. Or 2, your foil changed with the foil from another universe or timeline where you didn't drop it. Either way, you may never know. Fork disappeared and reappeared again. My 3.5-year-old son loves eating food using his blue fork and spoon that came with his lunchbox. Those are the only blue plastic utensils that we have in our house. Yesterday, he was eating dinner. He had his blue fork for meat and blue spoon for rice. He was sitting on the aisle by himself, and at some point he asks me, "Mommy, where's my fork?" So I go over and I start looking for it. On the aisle, under his plate, under his chair, and it's not anywhere. I was trying to avoid a potential meltdown, so I did look for it for a few minutes. So I go to the drawer and I get him a different fork, and I tell him to continue eating using another fork. He grabs it and starts eating, and then I look over and his blue fork is right next to his plate now. I mean, it's right on top of the napkin next to his plate, very much like it was at the beginning of his meal. I was surprised, and I tell him, "There's your fork." And my son, looking just as surprised as I was, asks me, "Where was it?" To be clear, if he was playing a prank on me, he would have made it known because he's still very little. We were both very puzzled by this. Imagine this. It's a sultry July night in Italy, 1900. King Umberto I ducks into a humble trattoria outside of Monza for a quick bite. Across the room stands the owner. Same coal-black mustache, same imperial jawline, and when the royal entourage stammers out a greeting, they discover he even shares the exact same name as the king, and far too many more coincidences that are way too close for comfort. Two perfect doubles, one royal crown, and a destiny hurtling toward the gunshots that'll echo before sunrise. Stay right here, because what happens after these mirrored lives collide reads less like a dusty history article and more like a cosmic practical joke with a deadly punchline. This is the No Way Files. It was July 28, 1900, in the quiet city of Monza, a northern town not far from Milan. Italy's reigning monarch, King Umberto I, had traveled there for a public ceremony. That evening, the king and his entourage stopped for dinner at a local restaurant. The food was excellent, the service was sharp, but what really made the night unforgettable wasn't on the menu. It was the owner. The moment that King Umberto saw the man, he reportedly froze. Standing before him was someone who looked exactly like him, and not just similar, but identical. Same face, same posture, same mustache, same height and build. And when the king asked his name, the answer made the whole room go quiet. Umberto, the owner said. Naturally, the two began talking. What started as a novelty quickly unraveled into something much, much weirder. The owner of the restaurant was born on March 14th, 1844, the exact same day as King Umberto. He was born in Turin, the same city as the king. They had both married women named Margherita, with the same spelling and everything. Now here's where it gets impossible. The restaurant had opened on the very day that King Umberto had been crowned King of Italy, on January 9th, 1878. Let's recap. Same face, same name, same birthday, same birthplace. Their wives are named the same thing, and they have the same coronation date as business opening. What is this? A glitch in the Matrix? A cosmic twin? A spiritual double? The king, reportedly unnerved but amused, told the man that they'd talk again soon. The two parted ways for the evening, but they would never meet again. The very next day, July 29th, 1900, King Umberto was preparing to present awards at a public athletic competition in Monza. The crowds were loud, the sun was hot, and security was tight. At exactly 10:30 p.m., as the king stood to address the audience, an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci emerged from the crowd and shot the king 4 times at close range. The king died shortly after. Word of the assassination spread instantly, but as the palace was reeling, another death was being reported. Mere hours earlier, the restaurant owner, Umberto's twin, had been killed in a gun accident that same day. 2 men, same everything, dead on the same day. Let's break this down. Could this be fabricated? Just some apocryphal tale passed down through whispers and wine? Actually, no. This story was recorded by Italian historians and widely reported across Europe. Newspapers of the area documented the uncanny encounter, and several biographies of King Umberto I mentioned the restaurant incident specifically. It's since appeared in the Big Book of Amazing Facts, Chronicles of the Unexplained, The World's Greatest Coincidences, and in writings by Carl Jung under the study of synchronicity. So, what are we left with here? A doppelganger? A literal twin separated at birth, maybe? A statistical anomaly so rare that it has no known match. Some theorists have suggested that the restaurant owner may have been an illegitimate relative of the royal family, a possibility that was never confirmed and conveniently buried after both men's deaths. Others believe that the event is the closest real-world example of bilocation, which is the idea that the same soul can exist in two places at once. Whatever the explanation is, it happened, and no one's ever explained how. After the assassination, King Umberto I was succeeded by his son, Victor Emmanuel III, who would go on to lead Italy through both world wars. The restaurant in Monza was eventually closed, and the name of the mysterious owner, this identical Umberto, was never recorded again. But the story has lived on for over a century, cited again and again by writers, philosophers, psychologists, and believers in the unexplained. It remains one of the most symmetrical and eerie documented coincidences in modern history. A moment where identity and fate and reality blurred and never quite unblurred. So what do we do with a story like this? Do we chalk it up to coincidence? Do we assume that there's some record-keeping error that nobody caught? Or do we admit that maybe the world has a way of playing with mirrors that we don't understand? Two Umbertos, one crown, one trigger, and one eerie addition to the No Way files. Could these memories be from another version of me? I've had two strange experiences from childhood that I remember vividly. So vividly, in fact, that the memories have stayed with me for years. And the weird part? No one else involved seems to remember them. And the more I sit with them, the more I start to wonder if they even happened at all, or if maybe they happened to some other version of me. The first incident, I must have been around 8 years old. I remember my dad trying to wake me up one morning, and when I opened my eyes, I couldn't move my legs, not even a twitch. I told him I couldn't get out of bed. It was like there was some kind of block between my brain and my body, like the signal just wouldn't go through. He scooped me up, carried me to his truck, and drove me to the hospital. I remember the building clearly. I'm pretty sure it was the Baylor Medical Center in Garland, Texas. I can still picture the unique porch roof at the entrance. We checked in, and they gave me a wheelchair. I remember actually being kind of excited about that part, wheeling myself around and trying to figure out how to turn using one wheel at a time. Eventually, they took me in for x-rays, and that part was scary. The machines looked huge and they were loud, and even though the nurse was kind and my dad was with me, I was terrified. They told me not to move during the scan, but since I couldn't move anyway, that was a bit ironic. Afterward, I stayed the rest of the weekend with my dad, and when school started again, they left me with my grandma for a few days to recover, and then my memory just stops after that. Years later, I brought it up to my mom, and she says that she vaguely remembers my dad taking me to the hospital for something about your legs, but she can't recall any of the details. And my grandma doesn't remember it at all. My dad and I are no longer in contact, so I can't ask him. It's like it only happened to me. The second incident is from when I was 12. My mom and I were visiting my aunt's apartment to use the pool. She lived in a complex that had a pool and ours didn't. The pool itself was shaped like an L, two rectangles forming a 90-degree angle. And it was just the three of us that day. My aunt and my mom were floating on inflatable loungers in the larger section of the pool, just chatting away. I was in the smaller section, swimming around. And then something started to feel off. I felt scared, and I wasn't sure why. I kept bobbing my head above the water, trying to call out to them, but I couldn't get enough air to yell. I was panicking, but they didn't notice. Looking back, I think I might have been drowning. Then, everything fades to purple, and that's the last thing I remember. Years later, I asked my mom and my aunt about that day, and neither of them recalls anything unusual happening. "You didn't almost drown," they said. "But I can still feel it. I can still feel the panic and the silence and the helplessness. So, what happened? Maybe they're false memories. Maybe I'm remembering things wrong. Or, and I know this sounds wild, but maybe those things happened to some other version of me in some parallel timeline or alternate thread of reality. And somehow, I still carry those memories with me. All I know is that I remember them, and I remember how they felt." The mental hospital children. Over the past few years, I've been admitted to psychiatric wards 8 times. Each visit was different, but my 4th stay still sticks with me, for a reason that I've never been able to forget. It was during that visit that I started to realize we weren't the only ones there. There was another patient that I spent time with, a girl who said she wasn't alone. She claimed there was a little boy that followed her. I can't remember his name, but I still remember his story. He said he was looking for his aunt. According to the patient, they had been in a car crash and got separated, and now he was stuck in the ward, lost and confused. She would draw what he told her, pictures of his life, his face, and things that he liked to do. In our room, the one that I shared with a couple of others, our walls were covered in drawings. Most of them were from the little boy, at least according to her. Others were old and left behind by past patients. Some were just doodles. Some were stupid, like random dick pics that people used to draw. But the boy's drawings felt different. They were quiet and thoughtful. Then, one night, something strange happened. The patient said the boy was ready to leave. He wanted to find his aunt, but before he left, he told her that he would say goodbye to all of us, and we didn't know what that meant until that night. It was late, and most of us were asleep. Because of night staff, our doors were always left open just a little bit. They'd come around with these giant flashlights to check in on us, and we hated it because they'd shine them right in our faces. That's what I thought this was at first. I woke up suddenly with this weird feeling, like I wasn't alone. The room was quiet, but I could feel someone close. I turned over in my bed and I looked toward the door, expecting to see one of the staff just doing their rounds, but it wasn't them. Standing just outside our doorway, in the dim hallway light, was a little boy. He was just there, looking at us, watching, and then he waved. I was half asleep and completely stunned, but I waved back. I didn't feel scared, just kind of sad, but still calm. He turned and walked away, and I never saw him again. The next morning, I told the patient, and she just nodded. Yeah, she said. He said goodbye. I still think about him. I wonder if he ever found his aunt, if he finally left wherever that he was stuck. And sometimes, even now, I get that same feeling. The one I had in that night in the room, like someone small is walking near me, just quietly passing through. I like to think that it's still him. I thought I was alone in the hospital bathroom. This happened back in mid-April 2018, and it still makes the hairs on my neck stand up when I think about it. At the time, I was working as a support worker. The guy that I was caring for, let's just call him Matt, had severe autism and required a 2-to-1 support at all times. That means he was never alone. There always had to be 2 staff members with him. One day, Matt came down with pneumonia and ended up being hospitalized for 2 weeks. Even during his hospital stay, he still needed constant 2-to-1 supervision. So, every day, either myself or another support worker would sit with him for long, sometimes grueling shifts, often 16 to 24 hours in a tiny hospital room. It was as monotonous as you would imagine. Matt was heavily sedated during most of his stay, so there wasn't much for us to do besides sit in the room and keep an eye on him. One night, at around 9 p.m., I told the other support worker that I was stepping out to use the bathroom. Truthfully, I didn't need to go. I just needed a break from the stillness and the fluorescent lights. The hospital was quiet. Visiting hours had ended, and the hallways were empty as I walked to the nearest toilet. I pushed open the door, and there was nobody there. So, I entered a stall, I sat down, and I pulled out my phone to pass the time. And that's when it happened. A knock. Someone knocked on the stall door. I hadn't heard the bathroom door open behind me. I hadn't heard any footsteps, but the knock was firm. I paused. I said nothing, and then it knocked again. 2 quick taps. This time, I spoke. "Hey, someone's in here." I got no reply, but then a piece of paper slid under the door. I froze, and I could feel my blood go cold. I shot up, pulled myself together as fast as I could, and flung open the stall door. But the bathroom was empty. I pushed open the door and looked out into the hallway. It was completely deserted. There wasn't a soul in sight. I went back inside, and I picked up the paper. I don't remember what the note said exactly. Maybe because I was too shaken to focus properly, but it was short and completely unexplainable. Who knocked? Who slid this note under the door? I still don't know. Maybe the long shifts, the sterile silence, and the exhaustion had started to get to me, but it felt real. Real enough that it still unsettles me to this very day. Because I swear, I was alone, and yet, someone knocked. It started with a routine emergency call. A woman, unresponsive and struggling to breathe, was rushed to the hospital. Nurses prepped the room, doctors got into position, standard procedure. A typical night in the ER. But, within minutes of her arrival, people started collapsing. Nurses fainted, A doctor dropped to her knees, and one staff member had to be dragged out by her ankles. And in the center of it all, a woman whose body seemed to be emitting something that no one could explain, something that turned a busy ER into a disaster zone. And to this day, no one can fully agree on a how. This is the story of Gloria Ramirez, the woman who may have become toxic to the touch. And this is the No Way Files. It was the night of February 19th, 1994, in Riverside, California. Paramedics rushed 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez into the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital. She was conscious, but disoriented. Her heart was racing. She was in the middle of a severe case of late-stage cervical cancer, and she was struggling to breathe. The attending ER team immediately began treating her. Oxygen, IV fluids, and medications to slow her heartbeat. Standard emergency protocol. But right away, something was off. As the medical team worked on her, multiple staff noticed a strange, oily sheen covering her skin. It had an odd texture. It was almost greasy. And then came the smell. The nurses described it as garlicky, fruity odor coming from Gloria's mouth. Others said it was more like ammonia. One nurse leaned in to draw blood, and that's when things took a turn. Inside of the syringe, she saw unusual particles floating in the blood. Small, white crystals. Moments later, she fainted. It wasn't just one nurse. Within minutes, 6 medical professionals collapsed inside the trauma bay. One nurse even began convulsing. A respiratory therapist became paralyzed. Another staff member couldn't breathe and had to be intubated. A total of 23 hospital workers experienced symptoms ranging from nausea and dizziness to temporary paralysis and blackouts. 5 of them required hospitalization. The hospital declared an internal emergency. The ER was evacuated. Staff began working outside in the parking lot. All while Gloria Ramirez, the patient at the center of it all, lay dying. Miss Ramirez was pronounced dead at 8:50 p.m., just 45 minutes after she arrived. But the story didn't end there. In fact, it was only just beginning. Riverside General was now under pressure from the media, from law enforcement, and from its own terrified staff to explain what had just happened. Why had treating a dying woman led to a mass chemical exposure? What kind of compound was found in her blood? And was this a biological event or something much stranger? The first official explanation came quickly. Mass psychogenic illness, better known as mass hysteria. Experts from California's Department of Health suggested that stress and fear may have triggered a chain reaction of symptoms in the staff. One nurse collapses, others panic, and the symptoms become psychosomatic, real, but mental in origin. But hospital workers were furious. These weren't untrained civilians. They were professionals, doctors, nurses, ER veterans. Some had physical symptoms that could not be faked, including liver damage and chemical burns in their nasal passages. So if it wasn't all in their heads, then what was it? The second, more scientific theory was a bit more compelling and more disturbing. Toxicologists proposed that Gloria Ramirez had been self-medicating her cancer pain using DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. It's an industrial solvent available over the counter in some places in the 1990s. It had been used as a pain reliever and anti-inflammatory, despite not being FDA approved for internal use. When applied to the skin, it can leave garlic-like odor, just what the staff had reported. But here's where it gets wild. Under certain conditions, especially in the presence of oxygen and under high temperatures used during medical defibrillation, DMSO can undergo chemical transformation. It can convert into dimethyl sulfate, a highly toxic gas phase poison capable of damaging cells, nerves, and organs on contact. If that transformation occurred in Gloria's bloodstream, it would explain the white crystals in her blood, the collapse of multiple staff, and the chemical burns and liver damage in survivors. However, there's still a problem here. The conversion from DMSO to dimethyl sulfate isn't just rare. It requires very specific lab conditions, including high energy input, not something that should have happened in a hospital trauma bay. So, did it? Or was something else at play here? To this day, no one fully agrees on the cause. The Riverside Coroner's Office ruled that Gloria Ramirez died of kidney failure due to her cancer and offered no definitive explanation for the mass poisoning. The DMSO theory remains the most accepted, but still not proven. And the hospital staff? Many still believe that something else was going on. Some suspect a chemical used in sterilization or cleaning had reacted unpredictably with something in Ramirez's body. Others quietly whisper about an unreported experimental treatment or even a cover-up. What we're left with is a case that sounds like science fiction, but is 100% real. It's been studied in toxicology textbooks, it's been recreated in chemical labs, and this incident is still used as a case study for what happens when science, stress, and something unexplainable collide. Miss Ramirez walked into the hospital at 8 p.m., and by 8:50, she was dead. And by 9, her name was already becoming legend. A woman whose final moments triggered a chain reaction that left a team of trained professionals helpless, or maybe haunted. We may never know what really happened in Room 1 of Riverside General that night, but one thing is certainly clear. She didn't just leave behind a medical file. She left behind a mystery. This has been the No Way Files, where real stories prove that reality is far weirder than fiction. Our first story comes from Shelby, one of the hosts of the Chill Seeker podcast. She has her own glitch story, and it's called The Self-Propelling Pillow. This glitch happened over 13 years ago, back when I was 16, and I still replay it in my mind like it happened yesterday. It was one of those moments that makes you question everything, especially when it happens so plainly in broad daylight, with no dramatic buildup, no eerie vibes, just a normal afternoon gone unexplainably weird. I was hanging out with my boyfriend at the time, at his house. Neither of us believed in anything paranormal. No ghosts or glitches or alternate realities. It was all stuff that other people talked about, not us. We were both very grounded and skeptical by nature. His house was new, a modern, fancy spec home, not the kind of place that you'd associate with anything haunted. It was a cloudy afternoon, but not dark or stormy, and there was nothing particularly odd about the atmosphere. We were just chilling in the living room, sitting on one of the two large couches arranged in an L shape. We were on the couch facing the TV, and just to our right, against the adjacent wall, sat the second couch. And out of nowhere, and I mean absolutely nowhere, a throw pillow on that other couch suddenly started levitating. It paused in the air for a split second, and then it launched itself across the full-length couch. Not fell, not slid, it flew, as if someone invisible had picked it up, held it in midair, and then casually tossed it across the cushions. My boyfriend and I both saw it. We immediately looked at each other with wide eyes and confirmed what we had seen. It wasn't a case of me hallucinating or misremembering. He saw it too. If he hadn't been there to back it up, I honestly think I would have talked myself out of it, convinced myself that I'd imagined the whole thing. But we both saw it, clear as day. And of course, the first thing we did was to try to find a rational explanation. We checked every door and window in the house, and all of them were shut. There wasn't even a breeze, plus it wasn't a particularly windy day anyway. And even if it had been, the pillow didn't fall or get blown off. It lifted, hovered for a moment, and then threw itself. There was no one else home. Nothing else unusual happened that day. Just that one bizarre, impossible moment. Since then, I've become a lot more open to paranormal and unexplained phenomena. This experience, and a few others that I've had since, completely changed the way I see the world. I'm not saying I know what it was, but I know it wasn't nothing. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't the wind. Was it a glitch in the Matrix? A ripple from some other timeline? A spirit just passing through? I have no idea, but if you've experienced anything like this, or have any theories, I would love to hear them. One person in the comments of this story admits, "This happened with my husband and I in our room too. We both saw it, and I totally forgot about it until just now." We're gonna have to revisit our version of the flying pillow story. And OP responds with, "Oh my god, that's crazy, and I'm so glad that it happened to somebody else. If you ever share your story, please let me know." Another person adds, "It's called a throw pillow for a reason." The night we met a shadow and lost 6 hours. This happened during summer break, sometime in the middle of high school. I was hanging out with my best friend, staying up all night like we usually did. Eventually, his mom kicked us out of the house because I wasn't allowed to sleep over. Totally normal night so far. We headed to my place and messed around on my Xbox 360 for a bit until my dad kicked us out too. He had work in the morning and didn't want to be woken up. So, we started walking around town. It was dark, well after sunset, and we were just shooting the breeze, talking about random stuff. And that's when my friend said, "Let's walk over to City Hall." So we headed that way, but as we walked, we noticed that something was off. It was weirdly quiet and completely empty. This was in the middle of Rhode Island, and usually the streets are still busy until 2 a.m. At midnight, you'd expect to still see people out, cars driving around, something. But the streets were dead silent. We brushed it off and kept walking, taking dumb pictures with his iPod Touch and my LG NV3. Eventually, we started heading back toward his house. We chose the main road, figuring it'd be the safest and fastest route. As we walked past my street, I realized still no cars. It was about 12 a.m. at this point, and the silence felt, strange. I pointed it out, but my friend shrugged it off. The main road to his house is about a mile long at our pace. It's a 20 to 30 minute walk. Midway, there's a gas station, and then 2 blocks past my street, I stopped and asked, "Do you hear that?" It was this faint, muffled static, like a radio and a TV playing at the same time, but distant. And that's when we saw a person. At first, I think we just assumed it was a homeless guy. Based on how people act downtown at that hour, we didn't want to get too close, so we crossed the street. And so did he, exactly in sync. The guy was stumbling in this unnatural way, arms flopped out, leaning backward, but his legs were perfectly mirroring ours. It was like watching a puppet, but I was the one pulling the strings. My friend noticed too and started whispering, Look, do you see what he's doing? He's gotta be on something." I got chills down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was copying me. Then he passed a streetlight, and that's when I froze. I couldn't make out any details. No clothes, no face, just this pure black silhouette in the shape of a person. He kept walking toward us, still mimicking my movements. I tried to shake him off by running side to side at one point, and it looked like he slid across the street, like a glitched out character in some video game. He got within 2 blocks of us, and at the exact same time, my friend and I locked eyes. We both said something like, "Hey, we need to run, now." On the count of 3, we bolted off the main road, sprinting down a side street. We didn't stop until we reached a 4-way intersection underneath a streetlight. We turned back to check behind us, and there he was, standing at the corner where we had just turned, watching us. Then, he sprinted straight at us. No hesitation either. We didn't wait. We turned into full-on track stars, running as fast as we could toward my friend's house. After a block and a half, we looked back, and he wasn't chasing us anymore. He was actually walking away, in the same direction that he had been going. Slowly, like nothing had even happened. He looked like the silhouette of a zombie. We kept moving, back onto the main road, now nervously talking about what the heck just happened. Everything seemed to go back to normal when a car passed us, but then, just like before, it was dead silent again. No cops at their usual spots, no cars, just nothing. Before his street, there's a highway with a small bridge you have to cross. Off to the right of that bridge, there's a little building for people who get their GEDs. We walked past it, and then we heard it. This intense static noise, like the sound that the DeLorean makes in Back to the Future when it time travels, but louder and more piercing. The entire sky lit up blue and then went pitch black again. Time felt like it slowed down for a few seconds, and even the air itself felt different. Then, suddenly, everything returned to normal and the sun was now coming up. It was just 12:27 a.m. when I checked my phone. Now it was 6 a.m. We stood on the bridge in shock, watching everything around us return to normal. We saw cars coming. We heard birds chirping. Everybody was turning on their morning lights. I refused to walk back home alone, so I crashed at his place. Later that morning, I walked home with his girlfriend after we both got kicked out again for not telling his mom what happened. And to this day, 9 years later, I still think about that night. It makes as little sense now as it did back then. When I finally got home, I crashed. I slept for nearly 26 hours. And when I woke up, my mom asked me if I was sick. Somebody in the comments asks, was the shadow tall? Did it have any eyes or anything? I only ask because a close friend of mine had 2 experiences with a shadow chasing him, and each time he described these bright, red, bottomless eyes. OP responds with, no, it didn't have any eyes from what I could tell, and it was pretty close to 6 feet. It was leaning really far backwards, and it appeared to be looking up. It also had its hands flopped down, but the legs were like someone walking normally until it started sliding across the street. Basically, like the normal walk, but it was moving sideways, not matching the feet movement. I should also clarify, when it was sprinting at us, it was still leaned backwards, which is why it was so horrendously scary to see. And it was still leaned like that, even as it passed under the streetlight, when my friend and I saw it as we turned back to see if it was still following us. The vanishing key. Hey, I finally got a story to post here after lurking for a while. So, I work for a company that test drives cars, and although I can't legally tell you what I was driving at the time, I can say that it uses a key card instead of an actual key to lock, unlock, and drive the vehicle. About a month ago, I'm finishing up my paperwork after getting back into the lot at the end of my shift. After I've checked to make sure that I've finished everything, I grab my paperwork, the key, and my personal belongings. And for some context, I was wearing a thin gray coat zipped up and then a proper winter coat over top of that was unzipped. I always keep my personal keys and wallet in the left pocket of my winter coat and my phone in my right pocket. As a result, work keys go into the left pocket. This night, I got out of the car and then locked it. I then fumbled putting it into my pocket, but I picked it up off of the snow and shook it a bit to get some snow off and just shoved it into my right pocket. I left my hand in there because it was a bitterly cold night, well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and I made the short walk to the building. I get inside, I finish the last of my paperwork, and walk over to one of my bosses who was sitting on a chair underneath the key rack. He begins checking over my paperwork, and I take the car key out of my pocket and I hang it up. I distinctly remember doing this and the way the melting snow shifted in the protective plastic case as I hung it up. My boss finishes checking my paperwork, tells me I'm all good, and I put the papers onto the paper tray, finish my time card, I put that and my clipboard away, and I grab my stuff and leave, making sure to glance at the key rack just to double check that I had put the key away and that it was there. I get back to my dorm and do my usual after-work routine of feeding the cat, putting my keys and wallet on the bedside table, hanging up my winter coat on a rack in the closet, and hanging up the other coat on one of the posts at the foot of my bed. I plug in my phone and I unpack my small personal bag. I then head into my shared bathroom to use it and to take a shower. But I get a call just before heading into the shower. I grab my phone and I see it's from my boss, who asks if I hung up the key and I'd tell him the truth. I said yes, I did. He then tells me that it's not there. I rifle through my winter coat pockets real quick, but I find no key, and I tell him that. He sounds super confused and says that he'll keep looking back at base and for me to keep looking around my dorm. After my shower, I find that I've gotten a text from my other boss saying that she has been informed that I've lost a key and that I need to find it before my next work shift. I quickly type back that I hung it up and 100% don't have it. But still, I rifle through the pockets of both of my jackets. I check my pants pocket, my bag. I do a quick sweep of my small dorm room and I find absolutely zero keys. It's around 4 a.m. at this point, so I head to bed. I wake up at around 1 or maybe 2 p.m. to another text from my boss saying that I, in fact, did not hang up the key and that I need to find it. Cue more pocket searches, more bag searches, clothes searches, and once again, no key. I check the parking lot as I'm walking to my car for my shift and check my car, but I find nothing. At work, myself and the shift lead both swept the driver's room and the parking lot both before and after everyone else left in their cars, and got the manufacturers to unlock the car for them and checked there despite the fact that you can't lock the car from the outside without a key. I was assigned that same car and left after 2 hours since I couldn't drive that night. The next day, my dad visited me at my dorm and helped search my dorm and my car, but still, no key. I worked again that night and I was assigned a different car. The key for the other one had still not been found. Fast forward to now, about a month later, and I've used those coats and the pockets multiple times. The clothes that I've worn have been washed and reworn. My bag has been cleaned out, and the driver's room at work is used daily, and multiple people have been searching for that damn key. I know I hung it up that night. I know that at least one of my bosses believes me on that. I haven't been punished, thankfully. Occasionally, someone will ask me if the key is turned up, and all I can do is shrug my shoulders and say no. I haven't found it. The vehicle was down for a week until a new key arrived from the manufacturer. To this day, I have no idea what happened to that thing. Another key to a different car, but the same make and model, also disappeared under mysterious circumstances a week ago, and the bosses are starting to get a bit worried. It waits to be seen if another key will dematerialize into the ether or not, but my coworkers and I are joking that they got taken by the fairies. Also, you need a passcode to get into the building, and every door in the building sets off a chime when they're opened. The front door is right next to the office that my boss would have been in if someone came inside. The back door opens into a parking lot surrounded by a barbed wire fence with a sliding gate that also requires a passcode and beeps when opened or closed. Plus, a window from the office looks out onto the area where a vehicle or a person would be to type in the passcode. All of this to say, the keys being stolen are basically impossible. A coworker would also have no reason to steal a key except out of spite, but also, I was the last one out that night. Nobody else came in or out the night that it vanished, and the boss that was there that night is the one who believes that I hung it up. We're all so confused, and I'm just glad that I didn't get into any trouble. This will probably get filed into my mind as a life is strange kind of a thing, and just become something that I randomly think about and just shrug my shoulders at. But still, where the heck did those keys go? woke up with a ripped shirt. I'm not totally sure if this is the right place to post this, but I'm honestly just really confused and kind of unsettled right now. Last night, I had a series of super vivid nightmares, like the kind that cling to you even after you've opened your eyes. When I finally woke up this morning, I realized that something wasn't right. The shirt I was wearing, an old one from like 2008 that I sleep in all the time, was cut in 3 different places. And not ripped, and not your typical wear and tear. It was a clean, deliberate cut. It's strange because this shirt has never given me any issues. I wear it all the time, and sure, it's old, but I was thinking maybe it was dry rot or something. Still, the cuts don't look like the fabric just gave out. They look like someone sliced it. And here's what's weirder. I don't have any scissors in the house. I accidentally left them in my car last week, and I live alone. So unless I somehow got up in the middle of the night, went out to my car, grabbed the scissors, came back in, and cut my shirt in 3 specific places, and then took the scissors back out to my car, and I have no idea what happened. I also didn't drink or smoke or do anything out of the ordinary last night. I literally just had some ice cream and fell asleep watching American Dad like I usually do. And it wasn't just the shirt. When I got up and started looking in the mirror, I noticed a bruise on my cheek. Just one. But I have no idea how it got there. I have no pain, no memory of bumping into anything in my sleep. My bed was exactly how I left it, and nothing seemed out of place, other than the shirt and the bruise and some black markings on my body that I can't explain. They're not ink or dirt, just weird marks that weren't there when I went to bed. I sent a photo of my mom, and her immediate reaction was that somebody must have broken in while I was asleep. But I don't know, that didn't make any sense to me. Everything was locked, no doors were left open, and there was no signs of forced entry. Nothing else in my apartment was touched or out of place. So I'm left with this cut-up shirt, a bruise on my face, and a handful of questions that don't have any answers. Was it a dream? Was it sleepwalking? Was it something else? Honestly, I'm just trying to figure out what happened. The doctor's appointment that bent time. This happened last year when I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for 2 p.m. I left home at exactly 1:08 p.m. to walk to the bus stop, which takes about 2 minutes. I waited at the stop for a couple of minutes before the bus came. It was an ordinary weekday afternoon. Weather was decent and I was feeling relatively relaxed about the day. Unfortunately, I caught the wrong bus. It completely missed the stop that I needed, so I got off at the next available stop. Normally, that ride takes about 12 minutes on a good day. That meant I now had to go back in the opposite direction to get to where I originally intended to go. I called my mom to let her know what happened as soon as I got off the bus. The timestamp on my phone says 1:12 p.m., which felt odd because I couldn't understand how I'd gotten that far in just 4 minutes. As I crossed the street at the traffic light to reach the opposite bus stop, and we were both laughing a bit at my misadventure. I wasn't panicked, just slightly annoyed. When I got to the other stop, I looked at the electronic bus timetable posted inside the bus shelter. I was still chatting with my mom, and I said, "The next bus is at 1:22 p.m., so I don't have long to wait." It all seemed pretty straightforward. I got on the correct bus, and according to my phone's timestamp, I called my mom again at 1:30 as soon as I got off that bus. From there, I had to walk to the doctor's office, which takes about 10 minutes. There are more traffic lights along the way, and they can take a couple of minutes to change, so I braced myself for a bit of a delay. But it didn't feel like the walk took that long. In fact, I was surprised at how quickly I arrived. Once I reached the doctor's, I sat outside for a bit, enjoying the sunshine and chatting with my mom. It was a chilly but dry day, and I remember thinking it was nice to take a breather after all that back and forth. The street was fairly quiet, and for some reason, it felt like everything around me had started to slow down. Eventually, I decided to go in and check in for my appointment. I walked up to the reception desk and I told them I had a 2 p.m. I looked at the wall clock and then at the time on the TV screen, which displays when and where to go for your appointment, and it said 1:30 p.m. I think, what? I checked my phone again. It also said 1:30 p.m. At first, I thought maybe their clocks were wrong, but they all matched, and my phone confirmed it. When I finished my appointment, I called my mom again and I told her what happened. She was just as confused as I was. How? She asked, echoing my own thoughts. I'm still confused about what happened. According to my timeline, I should have arrived after 2 p.m., or at the very least, close to it. But somehow, after all the waiting, the detour, and the walking, I still arrived a full 30 minutes early. Time just didn't seem to pass the way it should have. But hey, at least I wasn't late. If you guys will excuse me, that person called their mom so much I feel like I have to call mine now. I'll be right back. Okay, mom's good. Let's keep going. A hair straightener glitch. I experienced a glitch the other day that's left me feeling seriously weird. It involves my hair straightener, and I swear it makes no sense. Here's some background. I was gifted a hair straightener back in 2008 for Christmas by my mom. Somehow, miraculously, that straightener lasted me for years. It only broke maybe 9 months to a year ago. When it finally did give out, I went and bought the exact same one. It was the same brand, same design, just the newer version. Everything about it was familiar except for one small difference: the temperature dial. When I brought the new straightener home, I remember checking it out. I looked at the dial on the side and I noticed that it went up to 45 degrees. I remember this clearly, and I even laughed to myself about it at the time. I considered turning it all the way up to 45 and then thought, no, your hair would fry. So I turned it back down to 30, which is what I've always used. I've been using a straightener for nearly 20 years now. It's part of my regular routine. My hair is pretty much never not straight. I use it at least every other day, if not more. Well, yesterday, I go to use it again, and while I'm adjusting the dial, I accidentally bump it with my finger. So I check the setting just to make sure it's still at 30 degrees. That's when I notice something that completely throws me off. The dial only goes up to 30 degrees. That's the max. And there is no 45. I just stared at it for a second, confused. I double-checked to make sure that I hadn't accidentally pulled out my old broken straightener back out of the trash can, but nope, it was the new one. It's definitely the new one. I couldn't make sense of it. Why would I have such a vivid memory of seeing 45 degrees on there and thinking it was funny. Where did that number even come from? I know I saw it. I remember seeing it on the dial. I even remember reacting to it. This morning, I checked again, just to be sure that I wasn't imagining things. And still, it only goes up to 30. I know this sounds minor, but it creeped me out. It's like a piece of reality just quietly changed when I wasn't looking. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Because this is messing with me. Is this ADHD or proof of an alternate dimension? I bought my wife a gift, a set of nice ballpoint pens, the kind that come sealed in plastic on a cardboard backing, the type that you'd see hanging on a retail rack. So, not tiny or subtle, this was a semi-bulky item. The package was about the size of a paperback book, maybe a little wider, and firm enough that you'd notice it if it shifted in your pocket. It just barely managed to fit into my shirt pocket, where I also carry my phone. It stuck out slightly at the top, but I remember adjusting it a few times to keep it from falling out. I got home to find my wife cleaning the bathroom, and she asked me to help out, so I headed in there to pitch in. While I was leaned over the toilet, scrubbing, I got worried that the pens and my phone might fall out of my pocket and into the water. Definitely not where I wanted her present to end up. So I moved both the phone and the pens to my front pants pocket. I distinctly remember doing that. A few minutes later, I left the bathroom, crossed the hall, and walked into the bedroom. That's where things go fuzzy. A complete blank. Just an ordinary movement between two rooms, but now it feels like a gap in time. A minute after that, I reached into my pocket to grab my phone, and the pens were gone. They weren't next to the phone, not in my pants pocket at all, and they still weren't in my shirt pocket after I double-checked. I also checked the bathroom and found no pens. I checked the bedroom, found nothing. I went through every pocket of every piece of clothing that I had on, even the ones that ended up in the laundry basket. I even checked under the bed, inside some drawers, and in the hallway, just in case I had dropped them and didn't notice. Still nothing. They're not in any of the catch-all boxes or bags that I keep for stuff that I'm working on. You know, the kind that keeps my odds and ends from cluttering up a room. They're just gone. Vanished without a trace. I'm gonna have to go out and buy another set now to give to my wife. And yes, I know what you're thinking. Maybe you just misplaced them. That would make sense, except I'm very ADHD, and losing things is practically a hobby of mine, but usually they turn up within a few days. The current record for missing items in this household is 4 weeks. That's how long our TV remote vanished before finally showing up in the strangest place, down the narrow side crack of my recliner. It had apparently slipped inside the chair and taken a hidden tour of the upholstery before falling out of a hole in the back that, honestly, I didn't even know was there. But the pens? There's no chair crevices in the bedroom. There's no mystery gaps in the bathroom. Nothing that would make this disappearance make any sense. So for now, the pen remains a mystery. I'll come back and give updates if and when they decide to return. Reappearing movie tickets, glitch, or ghost. I was a teenager when my mom won VIP tickets on the radio to the opening night of one of the newer Star Wars movies. Both of us, being giant nerds, We were ridiculously excited, and it felt like we'd won the lottery. The day of the premiere finally came. I had the tickets with me. They were these big, laminated physical passes, about the size of a brochure. And this was pre-smartphone days, so no digital backups, no screenshots, just the actual tickets. Lose them, and that was it. We got into the car, and I sat in the front passenger seat. I remember placing the tickets carefully into the door slot, the little side compartment near the floor that sometimes has a cup holder. I even glanced at them a few times during the drive to assure myself that they were still there. I saw them in plain sight. We left with time to spare, but on the way to the theater, we passed by my great-aunt's house. She had dementia, and her sister had recently passed. On impulse, we decided to stop in for a quick visit. My mom parked in front of the house and asked me to double-check the movie start time so we'd know how long we could stay. I reached down to grab the tickets, and they weren't there. At first, I thought maybe they'd slipped down a little further into the compartment, so I felt around. Nothing. I could feel myself starting to panic. I checked everywhere. Under the floor mat, I looked in the glove box. I even got out and looked in the back seat and all of the surrounding areas of the door, and still nothing. I also ran my fingers underneath the lip of the pocket just in case they were somehow stuck, but it was empty. The only thing that I could think was that maybe I hadn't put them in the slot correctly, and if the door had been ajar when I dropped them in, they might have fallen out onto the driveway. I was devastated. There wasn't enough time to go home and get replacement proof, and again, no smartphone, no backups. We had nothing to show that we won these tickets. So we went inside and visited with my great-aunt. We ended up staying about 30 minutes, longer than we'd planned, since we weren't rushing off anymore. I was still sulking, replaying in my head how I could have lost them. Even my mom was a bit quiet about it, probably trying not to show how disappointed she was too. When we finally got back into the car, I shut the door, and I caught a flutter of movement in the corner of my eye. I looked down, and the tickets were sitting right there in the door slot, the same spot that I'd looked in a dozen times, the same spot that I'd felt with my hand over and over again. There they were, clear as day, just sitting there like they'd been there all along. I could feel my jaw dropping in real time. I pulled them out and I showed my mom, and she was just as baffled. She had looked there too. After a moment, she asked me to check the time and see if we still had a chance to make the movie. We made it just in the nick of time, barely. They had said clearly that no one would be allowed in after the movie started, and yet somehow we walked right in as it was about to begin, like the movie waited for us. My great-aunt's sister had recently passed, like I said, and they had lived together for many years. My mom thinks that maybe it was her way of nudging us to stay a little longer, that she moved the tickets to keep us from rushing out again. The only other explanation that I have? A glitch. Something unexplainable. A temporary slip in logic or time. I still think about this from time to time, and I try to reason it out, but even after all these years, I haven't come up with a single answer that makes any sense. This is the true story of Joseph Figlock, a Detroit man who found himself in the middle of not one, but two freakishly identical accidents, and changed the course of 2 lives just by being in the wrong place at the right time. This is the No Way Files, and this one drops fast. Let's set the scene. It's the summer of 1937 in Detroit, Michigan. The country is clawing its way out of the Great Depression. Most people are focused on factory jobs, family survival, and staying cool in the sweltering Midwest heat. One of those people was Joseph Figlock, a municipal street sweeper. His job wasn't glamorous. He wasn't a firefighter or a soldier. He didn't carry a badge. He just had a broom, a pan, and a city-issued uniform. But on a random day in July, as Joseph swept an alleyway behind a low-rise apartment building on Adams Street, fate dropped something directly into his life. Literally. As Joseph walked below a second-story window, a baby fell out of it. A young child, reportedly 2 years old, had been playing near an open window when, without warning, they slipped, tumbled out, and fell toward the concrete below. And then, Joseph Figlock caught the baby. The child landed on his shoulders and chest, knocking Joseph to the ground. Both were indeed injured, minor bruises and some shock, but alive. Hospital records confirmed that if Joseph hadn't been standing there, the baby would not have made it. Newspapers at the time praised him as a quiet hero. The Detroit Free Press called it a freak accident with a miraculous ending. But the story doesn't end there, because this wasn't a one-time thing. Fast forward 1 year. It's now 1938. We're on the same street, under the same apartment building, working the same job. Joseph Figlock was sweeping the alley again, part of his daily routine, when another child, completely unrelated to the first, falls out of the same window. A different toddler from a different family, but the same outcome. Joseph was once again in the exact right spot, and once again caught the child, breaking the fall and saving their life. The Detroit police and local newspapers confirmed that both children survived, and Joseph himself suffered only minor injuries in both cases. If this were fiction, you'd probably throw the book across the room, because how does that happen? Well, let's break this down. The chances of a child falling from a window in a given year, while rare, are not zero. In fact, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission now tracks this sort of thing, and it estimates that between 5,000 and 8,000 children in the U.S. fall from windows annually. But how many of them land on someone? How many of them are caught mid-fall? That number is essentially statistical noise. It's not just unlikely, it's almost impossible to happen even once, much less twice, to the same man in the same location. And yet, here we are. Figlock's case had been cited in dozens of books, from Ripley's Believe It or Not, to Chronicles of Coincidence, to Strange But True. It's not just local legend. It's documented historical events. So what are we supposed to do with this? Is it just pure coincidence? A 1 in a trillion fluke that accidentally repeated itself? Or is there something more to it? Some theorists have tried to explain it as spatial probability. The idea that because Joseph passed by that alleyway every day, the odds of him being there during something like a fall weren't quite as cosmic as they may seem. Others go deeper, suggesting a synchronicity event in the Jungian sense. Two unrelated moments connected by a strange, invisible thread of meaning. A few lean into simulation theory, calling Figlock a kind of anchor point, or an anchor being if you're familiar with the Marvel MCU. An NPC in a system where certain scripts replay with eerie consistency. And then there are those who simply say, "It happened. That's all we know. And that's all we'll ever get." Not much is known about Figlock's personal life. He wasn't a celebrity. He didn't give any speeches. He didn't write a memoir or capitalize on his 15 minutes. All we know is that he kept his job as a city worker for several more years. According to reports, he was quiet, polite, and humble. The kind of guy you might pass on the street and never notice. But for two families in Detroit, he was unforgettable. Their kids are alive because of him. And not just because they called him a hero, but because he was just simply there, doing his work. Most of us will never have a moment like that. We'll live our whole lives without standing in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. But Joseph Figlock did. Twice. And while it's easy to laugh or chalk it up to luck, maybe there is something more to it. A nudge from the universe. A wrinkle in the code. A reminder that sometimes the world bends in ways that we simply can't predict. To save a life, or to whisper that something else is watching. This has been the No Way Files, and when it comes to the impossible, we're just getting started.